Hello and welcome. Why does maternal health remain the luxury of the world's most privileged, and what will it take to make motherhood safer for the world's poor? One of the 8 Millennium Development Goals set up in 2000 was aimed at reducing maternal mortality by 75%. But of all the targets set, making motherhood safer is lagging behind the others. Globally, the fight to reduce deaths related to childbirth and pregnancy has only met 20% of its goals. Today, 500,000 women die during pregnancy every year, and 9 million children in the developing world will die before their 5th birthday. That means that one pregnant mother and 18 children will die prematurely every minute of every day of every year. As International Women's Day marks its 100-year anniversary, we ask, what will it take to reduce the rate of maternal mortality around the world? Remember, you can send us your questions and comments through text messages or through email. I have 2 guests to discuss these issues. The first is Grace Magazine covers around the world for 20 years. But beyond the glamour of the fashion world, she's also a staunch advocate for maternal health. Christy Turlington-Burns founded Every Mother Counts and recently made the documentary No Woman, No Cry, which explores the challenges facing pregnant women living in 4 distinctly different parts of the world. Christy Turlington-Burns will tell us more about that as she joins us from New York. And here in the studio with me is Jill Sheffield, the founder and president of Women Deliver, an international organization that campaigns on maternal health and women's empowerment. I thank you both for being with me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Christy, I'll start with you, please. Your concerns and awareness of the maternal health care issue came from your own experience with childbirth. Give us a brief idea of what happened. I know you explain it in your documentary, but just tell us what got you interested.
Sure. About 7 years ago, I delivered my first child, my daughter. And I had a perfect pregnancy, perfect delivery, actually, until after that. And I started to suffer a postpartum hemorrhage, which I soon learned was the leading cause of maternal deaths worldwide. Postpartum hemorrhage in many countries, it's the leading cause. So it's sort of opened up a window into what was happening around the world, and I wanted to understand better why so many women were dying. And then when I learned that so many were preventable, I wanted to dig further and see what barriers were there to accessing care.
What were your first steps? How were you planning to make a difference?
Well, you know, I started to travel a bit with the organization CARE. And when I first traveled with them to Central America in 2005, I was pregnant again with my second child. We spent some time in a small village where I was with other women who were pregnant or had just had their babies. And I looked around, having had the complication I had in New York City 7 years ago, I thought, what would have happened if I were here when I had this complication? And I realized that, you know, I probably would have died had I been in a situation where I was. There was no electricity, no water, no paved roads, no transport or emergency services available. So I decided that a film would probably be the best way to examine these barriers to care, and also to bring women around the world, to connect them to this universal experience of pregnancy and childbirth.
Right, let me bring in Jill Sheffield here, and good to have you with us too, Jill.
Thank you.
Now, when you look at all those issues that people are being constantly asked to support, why maternal health care? Why should that be such a prime concern?
Well, because women are basically the anchors to families all over the world. When you look at the parts of the world that have greatest difficulty with maternal health, Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, they're basically agricultural societies, which mean that women also do most of the labor. Right. So when a woman dies, the entire family suffers. The younger children can die, often do die. And the family has difficulty, and that's being very kind about it. There are food issues, there are economic issues, and I think that's the key issue, is that women do bring incredible benefits to their families, communities, and frankly, to their nations, their economic benefits, but also their social benefits.
Jill, I'm going to put an email question we got from a viewer in Ethiopia, if I may. This one came from Sileshi Tuji in Addis Ababa, who says, Given the enormity of the problem in developing and developed countries, I think the bulk of the work should be done by governments themselves by diverting funds from wasteful areas such as national security and the military. Now, of course, national security and military budgets apart, there are many issues, as I mentioned, that take attention, such as HIV, AIDS, polio, malaria, natural disasters. How can maternal health care issues grab a reasonable chunk of those funds then?
Well, I think there are two things. One is when we realize just how important women are to their countries, to the families and to their countries. The other interesting thing is if we were to shore up our health systems to deal with the difficulties of maternal health, it could solve any one of a number of other health problems in the same country. So you really get a twofer.
Right. It's almost an umbrella issue, isn't it?
Exactly.
So, right.
Exactly.
Christy, I'm bringing you back in here.
Ethiopia.
Go ahead.
Sure. I just wanted to say that Ethiopia actually is, to answer the person who sent the question, Ethiopia is one of those countries that it's one of the top 11 countries with the highest rates of maternal mortality, but they are having an amazing effect with a government-led health extension worker program. They've trained more than 30,000 health extension workers around the country. And so this is an example. This is a country that's doing something incredibly effectively and could serve to model for other countries nearby.
Well, Christy, I wanted to touch on your documentary, No Woman, No Cry, where you travel to Tanzania and you follow a young woman called Janet during the last dangerous moments of her pregnancy. There's a moment during your filming where you managed to capture the fragility of life in the face of poverty. We'll take a look at that.
Sasa mume wako hajaja mpaka saa hizi itakuwaje? Ili aweze kukusaidia kwa ajili ya kupata usafiri wa kukusafirisha Mount Meru.
Ampigia simu.
Maanake sasa kama itakuwa hivyo, sasa sisi tutakupelekaje basi Mount Meru? Maanake ni lazima upate gari uende naye kutokana na hii hali ulionayo. Una hela ya kwa ajili ya kwenda hospitali? Kabisa.
Christy, there we have the simple problem, the simple issue, but obviously potentially fatal issue of a woman trying to get to hospital from a rural area. Tell me about that incident, also how that must be a fairly common problem for a lot of women in that kind of environment.
Absolutely. Transport remains one of the biggest obstacles or barriers to care for women. That particular area of Tanzania, in northern Tanzania, we were 35 kilometers from the hospital. In some countries, it's much, much further. But here she was, she hadn't eaten in 24 hours. She had no money for transport, and she was being told by the clinic, who was unable to handle her situation, that she had to be transported and referred to the nearest hospital, which was 35 kilometers away. Had we not been there, I don't know what the outcome would have been for Janet. And we found this day in and day out, where we filmed all over the world, the same problem. And so I walked away from the experience of thinking, if we don't get beyond this transport predicament, which is why these healthcare workers going into the communities is going to be such a huge piece of finding the solutions.
And Christy, of course, Jill had mentioned earlier about how women do a lot of the work, and in a place like Tanzania, for someone like Janet, that is the case. I wonder how much there is an effort to try to emphasize that women are so much a part of the economic environment there too.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw her in those final days of her pregnancy. Her workload did not change one bit. I mean, here in the West, we're often given the encouragement to rest during our pregnancies, to take time off of work. That's not the case for so many women around